Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic, examining Esoterica. Hey guys, we have a slightly shorter episode again for you today because we're heading into a holiday weekend and I don't want to take up too much of your time. Our topic today is, what does you have to love yourself first really mean? Now, I've done episodes in the past about self-love, but this came in as a topic because I was on board Panda, which is one of the social aggregation sites that I go to that, it compiles different lists. I enjoy it. A lot of the things are kind of positive and helpful. They can give you, now some of them are distressing. You really do have to, anywhere you go on the internet, kind of curate your experience. But it also keeps me in touch with what people are saying outside of the spiritual community about things that are meant to have a spiritual meaning and a spiritual resonance, but then kind of get co-opted into pop psychology. And so before I get started on it, because it's a really important message that has been corrupted by our need to pass everything through the self perspective, which is also another term for ego. And when things are kind of processed through something other than a greater perspective, then it can become a lot about trying to judge another person. And so what I kept reading was that even though we've all heard it before, you have to love yourself first. And apparently in other communities and even within the spiritual community, this has been taken to mean until you love yourself, no one else will ever love you. And like, hey, swearing alert, which I rarely do on this particular podcast, but that is utter bullshit. And I have absolutely no idea where it came from other than it is a misinterpretation of the text. It is a rather radical misinterpretation of the text. So here's the thing. It's not true, and we're going to go into how it became kind of twisted into that, and also what it really means and how it can free you from punishing and difficult relationships and from your own trauma, because that's really what it's about. Before I get into that, I have to do the housekeeping at the top of this because that's when you'll listen to it. I'm Alane. You can find me at therisingmoon.com to book me for a tarot card reading or a life coaching session, and we can look into what is holding you back from finding the love that you want in your life. And first we discover it within, which is part of what that means. And then you can also find me at my Patreon, which will be linked in the episode notes and the description box down below. And then the video versions of these discussions and sometimes interviews always go up at Cronecast at The Rising Moon on YouTube, where I also do some pick cards. I do some other things. On my Patreon, we do weekly guided messages, monthly guided messages, teaching tarot in reverse, and it evolves into more things as the needs arise. What I keep finding is that people get very personalized messages within those readings, and the timing on them is absolutely stunning. If I ever have any doubt around the idea of divine timing and being connected to something, it is eradicated when I see the comments on things where it's the perfect thing for somebody to hear on a particular day. But there's always lessons and messages for everybody in all of those readings. So that's enough about me and how to find me. Let's get to the topic at hand. It has become a bumper sticker that is trotted out to try and help people in some ways be avoidant around self-understanding, quite frankly. That is how it got a little bit twisted. You have to love yourself first has nothing to do with you being lovable. Many people can love you and probably do, but you have not had a self-view of what your worth is. And so toxic people will come to you and try to stay with you. And why? Because toxic people will go to anybody, but it also creates something called the empath narcissist paradigm. And empaths, deeply sensitive, it includes all the healers and all the psychics out there. They are people who are highly sensitive, often through trauma at a young and a developmental age. And so they became something called hypervigilant that does not just exist in the 3D, but allows us to perceive things beyond the 3D as well. So empaths are always on the lookout for how somebody else feels. And here's the origin story of that. Almost always it was because of rejection within a primary building block for your emotional foundation. So it can be your parents, it can be your family, it can be your social settings. So it can be things about school and peer relationships as well. And we have a tendency to take it personally when we don't conform and then we're rejected or picked on. And sensitive people are often the people who are picked on or bullied because they're looking for reactionary people. Bullies like to feel power over other people, and so they poke at them until they scream. And it's just a little bit that simple. When we get older, And that bullying, by the way, can occur in adult life. Workplace bullying is a real thing as well. But it can damage your self-esteem and make you question your worth. And when you question your worth, then you allow people to treat you poorly because you don't know how to stand up for yourself yet, because you don't believe that you're truly worthy of love. And so that's actually the basis of you need to love yourself first, is nothing to do with so somebody else will love you, but so that you can protect yourself from those who would attempt to harm you, use you, deceive you, or in any other way manipulate you. When we're just a great big feeling looking for approval from others because it was denied us in a foundational aspect, which is what that formative damage and inner child healing and formative damage are synonymous terms. The reason I use formative damage is because it did go into your emotional response system that will then carry you all the way through adult life. So it has nothing to do with immaturity. It really doesn't have to do with remaining a child. What it has to do with is that a crucial part of self-esteem was denied to you always through no fault of your own. Always, literally always. Even if you were the weird kid, or maybe you were undiagnosed and you were on the spectrum, and so your social cues were completely different and people bullied you, that's not your fault. It's not. You were made who you are for a reason. And sometimes it's so that you will learn how to overcome your challenges, because our divine soul and our ego, they coexist, but they are not the synonymous things. They are not the same thing. Your ego is your personality, your personal view, your focus on self. It is not bad, by the way, because it is actually the thing that can help you protect yourself from others mistreating you. But in the empath narcissist paradigm, narcissists will look for people who will give and give and give, and they will take and take and take. And empaths always believe the more love I give to somebody, the more they will give it back, because I would be so grateful to receive love that that's how I would handle it. And you are looking for your self-validation and your worth in the eyes of others. And it's called mirroring. Mirroring is the concept of like not reflecting back what somebody says to you, which is a psychological thing. But mirroring in relationships and in spiritual growth is that what you are confronted with will reflect what you are trying to work on. So it reflects your wounds. And if you do not have good self-worth, again, I'm begging you to hear me. Stop being ashamed of that. You did not do it to you, but you can undo it. You can. The tools are available to you. Thank the Lord, they are actually available to you for free. And why do I say that? And by the way, as a not practicing Christian, why do I reference the divine that particular way so often? Because my connection to the divine was established in Quaker farm camp, where they have meetings. It's very silent. It is not something that it doesn't belong within a religious structure, which is a man-made structure to try and control you. Now, some of them are teaching the actual teachings of the figureheads of those religions, which are all saying the exact same things about kindness and compassion and love being the things that will elevate us to our divine selves. And that just happens to be true. But the reason that I say thank the Lord, or the sweet lords of mercy, when it comes to things being free, is people with poor self-worth have trouble spending money on themselves. And so they can have all the like professional help available to them, but they may lack the means. And if they have the means, quite frequently, they will deny themselves the things that they need because they were denied the things that they needed in that formative stage. And they think it's about their worth. All abused children have damaged self-worth. Now, does all damage result from abuse? No. Sometimes it is people who were not well, they were distracted, they had a job loss, they had family calamity. Some people with very, very loving parents ended up missing certain crucial building blocks in their foundational emotional response system through no fault. They did not have punishing caretakers. They had caretakers who had other responsibilities that had to be met, leaving that person with a shortfall, leaving the person who is developing with a shortfall. And it can be that simple. And they are tools that we can acquire as adults. When we start moving towards these very complicated terms, because that is actually a really complicated idea, the idea that in order for you to receive the love that you want, a crucial element, the key to it, is being able to call a halt when people are trying to take too much from you, expect too much from you, use, manipulate, deceive you, because we see the world as we are first. And empaths are frequently very, very loving people. And in fact, healers often become, they have poor personal relationships sometimes because they take all of that healing love and they try to give it to one person instead of finding the way in which they're to give it to the world in general. And I will say this over and over again, life's purpose and profession are not synonymous terms either. Your purpose in this life may in fact be to release generational trauma, to release those generational curses, because that's another element that can cause very well-meaning people to accidentally damage the children in their care in a way that will ruin their foundation and their emotional response system until the actual individual goes back and does the repairs that are needed. Through self-talk, through self-examination, self-understanding, it really helps to get a good base knowledge around what goes into your emotional response system. Now, I'm going to be a little tiny bit controversial here in saying don't look towards Freud. Freud was a very conflicted person, and he had really inappropriate relationships with patients. There's a couple things with his daughter. It's not too creepy, but it's like, whoa, there was a lot going on there. He had good basic ideas, but things were meant to evolve and grow and become more sophisticated. And his was the first crack in the understanding of the ego, which is the self. And so there's good material there, but it was not the end all be all. It's why behaviorists like Carl Jung became more popular, because it was one building block in a strong foundation, but it was not the actual slab foundation to build a sturdy structure on. It is one view into self that can help you. But it is very outdated, and again, it was very simplistic, and it was also formed at a time when men and women did not stand on equal footing at all. And that is another thing that we need to talk to a little bit about in the what does you have to love yourself first really mean. It is becoming less and less prevalent, thank goodness. But after women began to have their own income, to be able to buy homes by themselves, to be able to open credit by themselves, the romantic narrative in our fiction, which forms our idea of our imagination, what we hope for, what we dream about, became very romanticized. And if you look at early attempts in this, like love story, which love is never having to say you're sorry, oh my God, that is really, really, really not true. You are not supposed to accept abuse in love relationships. And loving yourself first is the thing that will make you go, hey, what are you doing? If you call somebody out on something and they do not change the behavior, please accept the fact that they're not going to. People change for their own reasons, and people can change very radically indeed, but they have to be the person determining that they're going to do it. And when we change for another person, it is not seeing the fault within ourselves. It is a manipulative tactic in a way that is not, I'm not condemning it. Some people really do try and train something to retain someone in their life, but it does not actually have an authentic root within them because they don't see the need in their own self. They see it in the, if I want to maintain this professional relationship, this personal relationship, or this familial relationship, I must undertake these behaviors. Sometimes we can like fake it till we make it, and people do radically change over the course of time. But the more toxic somebody's growing up experience was, the less likely that will be the case. For minor things, faking it until you make it, like you can learn to express yourself when you're angry in a way that is not damaging to another person, as the mildest, for instance. That is a change that's a behavioral change to be heard. Now, that is something that is more surface level, but a foundational change in how you approach the world, where you want to see other people as equal, you want to care about their feelings, is something that can happen for anybody, but they have to really, really want it. So in lieu of being able to control what somebody else would choose when you care about them, you have to look within yourself and ask yourself, why would I accept poor treatment from somebody? Because you're hoping they'll change? Well, they won't change unless they really want to change. And never try to earn somebody's love through your own good behavior. If somebody does not love you, it is not because you are not lovable. It is because they are not in a space where they're willing to give love. Maybe you're not compatible. Maybe you don't have the same basic settings in life. Look at it that way. You're incompatible forms of software and firmware. That's one way to look at it. But that when we encounter somebody who doesn't want to accept the gift of our love, instead of saying, this must be a rotten gift, there's something wrong with me, you understand, you don't practice that particular holiday, do you? Because if you were really in a good place, you would understand that my gift of love is amazing for other people, because I will show up for other people on my actual deathbed if I have to. I would rise up from it to try and help somebody I truly, truly loved. But it has to go both ways. And what I started to get into is that the narrative programming around romance made women really, really invest in the idea that their worth was contained in another person, in particular a man, deeming them worthy and loving them. And that would then convey worth onto them in a society where men had most of the power. And so it was a little bit true, but unfortunately, the idea of romantic love is often just initial attraction, where we really are attracted to people who contain the things that we don't sometimes. And the worst part about growing up after a form of abuse or toxicity or abandonment, which frequently happens as well, particularly in an age when so many relationships end in divorce, children can end up feeling very abandoned. What can happen is that we are looking for that deficit in the other person. And so they are an energetic or a behavioral match for the person who initially denied us that love. And so that's a form of mirroring as well, where you're still looking for your worth in the reflection of somebody else's view of you. And when we start to look in and we find the things that it's like, well, what if I don't find myself very lovable? What if I'm a mess? What if I have long-term whatever? That doesn't have to do with whether or not you're lovable for self. Those are your challenges. Those are the tests that you're being asked to take. Those are the lessons you are being asked to learn. And please remember, we associate karma with rewards and punishment, but it's not. Karma is about the energy we are trying to learn from. Karma is lessons. It's why we can have so many karmic relationships, which is what an empath narcissist paradigm actually is a form of karmic relationship that will show you this is the treatment I should not accept if I love myself. And you should love yourself. If you're doing your best, if you are trying to do good within this world, love yourself entirely. It doesn't matter if you're a little flawed, we all are. And if you aren't and you just want somebody else to spoil you and take care of you, please remember it is our job first to protect, to spoil, and to take care of. And so a lot of the times people healing from these toxic connections will be asked to spend some time alone so they can learn to really value themselves. And after a while, it gets really fun because you get in touch with that inner child, the part of you that likes to play and have fun and find your own company entertaining. The part of you that can find healthy escapism within is available to you when you are single. Now, does that mean that it's not available in relationships? That is not what it means. But some people lose the ability to connect to that part of themselves and may in fact be asked to spend time alone until such time as they find it. And that part of you helps you protect yourself, and it's that simple. The part of you that knows I can find my own happiness, I don't need you to give it to me, has to be sustained, cared for, and understood. So it's never about no one will love you until you love yourself. It is that you will accept poor treatment from others until you love yourself, because you won't know that you're worth more than that. You deserve love from you first. And when you love yourself, you quit criticizing yourself and you say, I do have this thing I'm working on. I do have this challenge. I do have this set of circumstances where if I want to be the best version of me, I may have to change some things. And in particular, people who were emotionally abused really struggle with expressing anger appropriately. They really do, because not because they're bad people, it's because they didn't learn any better. It's almost like we have to deprogram ourselves, because just like I was talking about the romantic narrative that would let women accept poor treatment in the quest for please let me be powerful and careful and, somebody who's like valued in the eyes of another person, because that's the only way to be valuable in this world. That world has changed a lot. Thank goodness it has changed a great deal. And women come closer and closer every single day to standing on equal footing with men. As we should. We are highly capable. We are complex creatures. We are capable of all forms of intellectual progress. And we have a tendency to be incredibly organized as well as multitasking exceptionally well. Now, men have their own gifts. I actually like men a lot and I feel for them. They have their own pressures. They genuinely do to be valued by their profession, how much money they make. The pressure that we put on men to hide their emotions is toxic in the extreme. It leads to a lot of substance abuse as well, as people only really know how to access their inner world by lowering their inhibitions because society has created those inhibitions in concrete for them when they tell them it's wrong to feel sad, it's wrong to feel joy, it's wrong to feel and express grief. And women sometimes participate in that structure saying that it's unmanly for somebody to cry. Just the other day at the DNC, Gus Walls, who is actually neurodivergent, had a very emotional reaction to his father. And people on the far right made fun of that. And it was not okay to make fun of him, period, but it was particularly not okay because he is actually neurodivergent. But it is that shaming of men expressing authentic emotions that then turns into a very toxic substance for men. And then we wonder why they're so angry, because that is the thing that comes up as our protective device when we don't have access to self-understanding. Self-love is self-understanding. It is not telling yourself that you're perfect, because nobody is perfect. We're all working on something. But you learn to love yourself for the efforts that you make. Instead of saying, I did this wrong, I did that wrong, you say, look at how much progress I've made, and I love me for trying and persevering, and oh my God, I'm tough. And then you start to admire yourself. Your challenges are not there to hold you back. Your challenges are there to show you what your true strengths are, because you can find them. I suffer sometimes from depression. I do not take medication for it. I do exercise, meditation, a couple of other things. I'm able to do that because the chemical imbalance that I'm prone to is at a minor level, and it does respond to behavioral changes. But that doesn't make me unlovable because it is a genetic predisposition towards that. What it did create in my family is a tendency to self-medicate. And so there is a generational trauma or a generational curse that has to do with substance abuse and trying to escape an inner world. And we have so many of those things in our world, and it isn't just drugs and alcohol. It's buying things, it's looking for the approval of others, it's trying to make sure you're always dressed in a way that somebody else would approve of. It is the constant seeking of validation from an exterior source instead of finding the self-admiration that comes from self-understanding and self-acceptance that can include saying, I need to learn how to control my temper because it drives people away. I need to learn how to express my anger in a way that can be heard. I learned to hurt other people because other people hurt me first. And sometimes we have to unlearn those lessons and learn new ones. And that can be part of self-love as well. But the idea that until you love yourself, no one will love you is in fact absolutely false. It is just that until you love yourself, you will be unlikely to accept truly healthy love from other people. And that's what that is. Because the toxic people will come and take all of your energy, and you won't know that you're worth putting up the boundaries, sending them away. Everybody can have a bad moment. One of the things that I read in comments was like, hey, all these people talking about protecting my peace and my boundaries, what you're going to do is end up with no friends and great boundaries. Sometimes we have to compromise. Sometimes we have to forgive. But it isn't sustained abusive behavior that we're being asked to forgive. It is forgiving somebody a moment of frustration. It is forgiving somebody a moment of distance as they worked on their own stuff. When I was trying to heal from a very toxic situation following a long marriage, I didn't have a lot to give to my friends, and I withdrew quite a great deal. Now, most of my relationships had been, I'm actually a really good person to talk to. I give good advice. It's part of the reason I do it professionally these days. But I didn't have a lot to give. And my friends were very, very used to me being a good sounding board and a good shoulder. And I was like, I need me right now. And so I had to back away from a lot of people. And that wasn't that they're toxic, it's that I didn't have good boundaries. And as I was initially healing, the only way I knew how to set a boundary was with a concrete wall that nothing could cross. Now I'm a lot better at give and take and like understanding when I feel like, oh, I can't do this right now, and being okay with not doing it right now. I'm currently in another hermetic phase, which whenever I do that, it's self-isolation. It gives me a time to meditate more, to connect more, to find the inspiration about what I'm supposed to do next. It is an important part of the work that I do where I isolate myself for long periods of time. And I'm able to do that without it being psychologically destructive to me, because the thing that kept me alive and sane and in much better shape than other people who had survived equally and more toxic situations than I did is that I had refuge within, because I was left literally alone so very much. And I mean that in such a literal way, that it wasn't that I felt isolated. It was that literally I spent time alone at a level that was not interrupted for years on end. And I lived in a very large house. And so it really was like living in, and it was all empty of furniture, because that's how weird my life was. So I lived in this echoing empty house that my imagination could fill it up with all kinds of things. And I was a reader, and so I was always in my own world. And so when I retreat into my own world, it is recharging for me. And I had to learn to respect that in the society that tells us that being alone is really, really damaging for you. Some of the things, just like how you have to love yourself first, is actually an entirely healthy statement. When we give it over to a societal structure that then wants to control us, it takes on a different meaning. And so we are taught that isolation is terrible for people. Isolation is one of the things that can allow you. It's not isolating if you are enjoying your own company. It is not isolating if you find your healthy escapism there. It is not isolating if you are able to withdraw into self to take care of self. That is self-care. Self-care will look different for different people. And for me, my self-care can run towards, I need to be alone, 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 not having any forms of social interactions outside of what I do, because what I do is deeply social. And I like it. I really, really care about people. I really care about my clients. But for me to recharge, for me to fully heal, I also need to just withdraw into self a great deal. And that's what works for me. And that is also what self-love can give you, is the permission to tell yourself, this is what I need, so this is what I will do. But we can all take things to an extreme, just like taking that good statement of you have to love yourself first into an extreme, because no one will ever love you until you do. Again, it is a radical interpretation, and please pay attention to the words radical and extreme. They have an agenda behind them every single time. Somebody trying to control a narrative flow, like all the rom-coms of the 80s and the 90s that were trying to get women to really invest in the I must have romantic love. And it's not, men were, I must have success, I must have this. Women really were, I have to find somebody who is my soulmate, who is my other half, who will complete me, who will get me on every single level. Guess what? You can do that for yourself. And the other comment that I read was, why would you do that? Why would you ever want to have if you're so happy by yourself, why would you ever want to have a romantic relationship? And precisely, that's it. It doesn't mean that you would remain alone. It means that you would never accept a poor imitation of love. So that when somebody who is toxic, those toxic people who will go towards anybody, when someone is toxic, you withdraw from them easily because you have your refuge within. You don't need that other person, you have you. But you can and do meet people with whom you click, who have a similar worldview, who are trying to do things that you are. And really, any worldview that is about power is corrupted, because power does actually corrupt unless we take steps to understand that power comes to us from other sources and that it isn't about us. And ultimately, self-love can lead to the release of ego and everything needing to be about how you feel or how I feel, but rather about this doesn't matter that much. The easiest way that I have to illustrate that is people in pain lash out at other people, and you'll see it in comment sections all the time. When you understand what somebody else does is reflecting their external world out into the world around them, it stops having any power over you. It doesn't cause you to say, why are they doing that? You get it. You're just like, you got stuff going on. You haven't done your work. You're in pain. You're confused. And clarity is within. So you have to love yourself first. Does it mean you'll never have a relationship until you've healed all your stuff? No, actually, I have a lot of people who are in very good relationships these days who are still working on their inner world, because they had good enough boundaries that they're able to protect themselves, but they're still trying to get to know themselves. So that's a stage in healing as well. You do not have to be perfect. You do not have to be the healthiest version of yourself to have love from an exterior source. But what you do have to be is healthy enough to say, I will not take the imitations. That's what it means. You will reject the imitation of love when you have real self-love within. So guys, I just wanted to explain that because it's been driving me crazy how many times I have seen this in the spirituality can take a toxic turn when we lose the true meaning of things. And that is the true meaning of you have to love yourself first. And does it mean that like you'll never have moments of like, dear God, do I really have to do that? No, you will still have them because it doesn't render you perfect when you love yourself. But what it does is whenever we love something, we love that person, that animal, that set of circumstances for what it is, and we accept what it isn't. And that's what we're doing with ourselves as well, is learning to accept, I'm still working on that. I'm still working on that. Sometimes I have out of control anxiety because I have an anxiety disorder. And it's still something that like I have to have this very robust self-dialogue of like, why are you frightened? This is not scary. This is actually very routine stuff. And you're doing really well with it. And when you have self-love, those are the type of dialogues you have within. You don't call yourself stupid. You don't berate yourself. You say, well, we're still working on that part. You live in a coexisting energy with the part of you that is still reflecting your damage outward. And when you feel the damage, when you understand it, when you're no longer suffering from the wounds, does that mean that you change entirely? No. It just means that you recognize when your lesser aspects are trying to run your personal narrative and you take away its power by calling it out without a feeling of shame, without a feeling of dislike, without a feeling of that makes you unlovable. Instead you say, nope, did work on that. Work on that. I can be too direct. It's something that I've always been working on because that lack of socialization, I literally didn't learn the social rules. I had to teach them to myself as an adult. Now, here's where the generational gifts come in along with the generational curses. I've shared before that on my father's side, I come from an exceptionally long line of teachers. I mean, whoa, levels of back, like the 1700s, the late 1600s. I come from a very, very long line of teachers. And that genetic predisposition is the thing that allowed me to learn the things that I needed to, because I could teach myself all of the things that my very strange formative experience did not teach me. But I had to be willing to acquire the knowledge, and I had to see the need of it. And when we don't like ourselves, we can deny ourselves the things that will make it better. And instead we reach for painkillers rather than true healing. And that's where the various forms of addiction that we are asked to engage in by a society that, like the one that everybody has, like pretty much everybody, that's an overstatement, probably 87% of people at a completely arbitrary number, is a screen addiction, a phone addiction. It's something that draws your focus. If you really want to do your work, you have to be able to focus on yourself. And that's why I'm always nagging people about doing meditation in the way that works for them, because it allows you to drop into your body and to focus on self, what you're really feeling, why you might be feeling it, and what you can do to make yourself feel better. Self-love and self-care are besties. And when you really have it, you don't worry about the I'm not perfect yet. Instead, you say, I'm working on it. I'm really proud of the progress that I've made. And does then real love come to you? It's already there. That's the point. That's the point. You don't keep looking for love from an exterior source because you have it within. You have it without in your ability to connect, because we all really do have guidance available to us. And listen, atheism is a real thing. And it's because people really associate the idea of the divine with religion, which is, like I said, there's a lot of hypocrisy in most of those religions. But a personal connection to something that is a higher power is actually, it is within. You don't need a structure without it. You don't need something without, which is something exterior to yourself. It's always there. And the people who really don't feel it, they're not open to it, and that's okay. That's okay to choose that path. I'm not the arbiter of anything, and their path is valid for them. But it doesn't negate your real connection if somebody else doesn't believe in it. Believe that if you feel that you're being guided, you are. You don't need to be able to prove it because you can feel it and you can see the evidence of it in your life. And I could do like a 6 hour long podcast on the incredible number of different synchronicities in my life, the serendipity in my life, that this happened and this happened. And it's like, that's a lot of evidence of perfect timing, that either I have amazing intuition, which I have pretty good intuition, but it's beyond me. It is beyond me. So I have proof in the ways that I need it, and I never have to justify it or qualify it or quantify it by another person. And self-love will also connect you to your ability to think something loves me enough to be helping me in this. So you have to love yourself first. You never have to do anything, but you would benefit from it, and your exterior relationships would benefit from it, and your interior condition would benefit from it. And every single relationship that you have would benefit from it, because you will no longer resent other people for hurting you when you know how to protect yourself. It never gets that far. And that's the other role of self-love. So that was today's Logical Magic Examining Esoterica. What does you have to love yourself really mean, and what it doesn't mean? And please, if something in a spiritual community seems to be shaming you for a struggle, it's bullshit. Let it go. Someone has misinterpreted something from a point of ego. And people do that all the time, to be able to see that couldn't really happen to me because it's that person's fault. Okay. So sorry for the swearing, because I really rarely do it on this podcast, but thank you for joining me. If you need to find me, you can find me at therisingmoon.com. You can also find me at Chromecast with the Rising Moon on YouTube. And I have a Patreon linked below in episode notes and description boxes. And I hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend. Love yourself. You're trying your best and you are not alone in this. Take care. Be well.